Don't bother looking up there. I don't have any slides. I stand before you as the man who once had to tell Steve Jobs he could not use the 55 slides he had brought to one of my conferences after two of his vice presidents said, and I quote, "I can't tell him that. You have to do it." The clock here is ticking, but I think I want to take a second. I think it's important just for a round of applause for Saul and Tori and the whole crew here. He's right that I was privileged to be on the stage a couple times in the early years. And some of you know I produce, along with my partner Kara Swisher, our own conferences and have done so for 13 years. And it's a hard business, and Saul has done a fantastic job, and so has his team. I imagine that he invited me back this year because of my meteoric rise in business. In 1966, I had a job around the corner from this building at the Providence Journal as what they then called a copy boy. I got coffee and donuts for the reporters and ran pieces of paper, that's what they meant by copy, around the newsroom and to the people who eventually took it to the printing presses. And today I stand before you as the CEO of a new startup, and it only took 48 years. It is meteoric. But I want to, my story most recently has been about launching a startup at an age which is considerably beyond what you read about and hear about. But I want to touch on really three things. One is brand, one is entrepreneurship, and one is the difference between invention and innovation. So first of all, brand. We know there are big brands in the world, famous brands. If I look out from this stage at the audience, it looks like an Apple commercial. And I mean, you know, that logo glows on the back of all your MacBooks for a reason. And I've been spending the last week, 10 days, dealing with this iPhone 6, which is made of aluminum, except the Apple logo is stainless steel. This is up here for a reason. This is a brand. And it's a hell of a good brand, by the way, and it's nicely done. But you all have brands, and I have a brand. And I have learned, one of the things I've learned in the last 9 months in raising money, millions of dollars, and hiring people and getting our startup going, Recode.net, which is our tech and media website, and the Code Conference Series, which is our conference, tech and media conference series, going, is that brand really matters to people. People will actually fund you, back you, buy tickets for your events, read your stories, partly because of your brand. And so for those of you that are starting out or restarting out, you got to pay attention to your brand. And it's not just doing some slick marketing. Your brand does involve some marketing. It does involve some getting yourself out there. But I think it involves working really hard to decide what you want to stand for and delivering on it. Saul mentioned that I made a decision early on to stand for the average consumer when there were most other tech writers at the time doing something equally valid. I want to say it's equally valid, but just different, which was to write for the geeks, the hobbyists, the enthusiasts, the techies. In my case, I think my choice paid off. We, as a team at Recode, and before that at All Things D, which was our previous effort, which was wholly owned by Dow Jones, the publisher of the Wall Street Journal, made a decision to stand for quality. Now, I know everyone says they do quality, and many, many people do. Most of the people up on the stage do fantastic quality work. But you probably wouldn't be surprised if I said that the web is full of crap. There's a lot of crap out there. There are a lot of people who either have or should retract a lot of stories, and there are a lot of people who will throw up anything they hear without rigorous reporting. We just have made a decision to take the standards from the very best of the old, supposedly over-the-hill newspaper and magazine press and inject that into a fast-moving, nimble, much less formal kind of web journalism, but always keeping standards. And so quality matters. You can make a successful business by being sensationalist or doing a cheap, crummy product. You can make a successful business by doing a quality thing. We decided to do quality. Whatever it is, whatever you decide in your particular field your brand ought to be, you have a brand, and you are a brand. And it means that there are some things you don't want to do and some things you do want to do. And you want to just focus on that. So if your brand doesn't involve a lot of pictures of you drunk at parties on Facebook, which is fine, getting drunk at parties is fine. The question is it going to help or hurt your brand? Just one small example. You need to think about it. Entrepreneurship is tied into brands because it helps you. But entrepreneurship is something you either have or you develop or you never have and you never develop. I worked for many years, as Saul mentioned, at the Wall Street Journal, which is part of a big media company, Dow Jones, which is part of a bigger media company, News Corporation. And my job was to be a reporter and then a columnist, and they paid me pretty well for it, and I became well known, and I was able to give speeches for a lot of money. By the way, Saul pays nothing. I should point that out. And it was fine, but I wanted to be entrepreneurial. I wanted to invent new roles for myself and do new things. And so, as I mentioned, my personal technology column, which I started in 1991, that was being entrepreneurial. And I can tell you there was a hell of a fight inside the Wall Street Journal about letting me have that column. I don't have time to go into all of it now, but part of it was about them not wanting voices in the news pages, even though every other newspaper had sports columnists and political columnists and other kinds of columnists. The Wall Street Journal, which already had an extremely strong-minded editorial page, worried about having voices on the news page. But secondly, there was a feeling at the Journal and at most other media organizations that they are reluctant to build too many stars. They are reluctant to create employees who have leverage, who can't be considered fungible. And I understand their point of view, but anyway, we won the fight. I was able to be entrepreneurial and go off on my own and do the column, and it's thankfully you or some of you and many other people read it, and it was a success. The next thing we did was I had a friend, as I mentioned, Kara Swisher, who was also a columnist at the Journal. We went to a lot of tech conferences. We saw they were lousy. We thought we could do better. Dow Jones let us start a conference business. and later a website called All Things Digital, and it was very successful both journalistically and financially. Made a profit every single year that we did it, even during the depths of the recession. In January, we left. And we left because there is a limit, we discovered, to being entrepreneurial inside a big company, at least a big media company. There are just so many competing claims on big companies with multiple products that they develop a certain risk aversion. It's very hard to be willing to fail in a big company. They don't quite get that doctrine, most of them. And you need to be on your own. And so we went out. We told Dow Jones we were going to leave. We went out. I decided, even though I was of an age and had the financial ability to do so, not to retire, to have another chapter, to do this startup. We got unsolicited offers of quite generous funding, and we saw, and we, as the word spread that we were going to do this, we got even more. It was very bizarre to me to do something that I had been writing about, and we had been writing about, which was the process of getting funded and getting started up. But we did it. We're 9 months in, and I'll tell you what I think the most interesting lesson is. The most interesting lesson, and it goes back to that a Venn diagram of kind of design and business, is that if you do it right, you really can pull together the business side and the content side, whether it's engineers or journalists or designers or whatever you want to call the content side, and pull together. If everyone is on the same page, you keep your lines of communication open, and you really foster a team spirit. The last thing I wanted to touch on very quickly is the difference between invention and innovation. Most people think of innovation as meaning you invented it, you came out with it first, end of story, everyone else gets closed out. The truth is that if you look back to the history of invention and innovation, it's not that simple. Henry Ford didn't invent the car. He just innovated in figuring out a way to get the automobile out to as many people as possible at an affordable price. And it really made the automobile a force in the world. The people that invented the automobile, and there are numerous claims in different countries, couldn't quite put it together that way. Apple didn't invent the smartphone. It didn't invent, I see all these MacBook Airs, which is essentially a thin, light laptop that has decent power. There were a number of them before the MacBook Air. Believe me, Sony really probably invented it, but they never could sell very many of them. They never could figure out quite the way to make it not so dainty, to make it rugged and thin and light. Apple did that, and that's a specialty of Apple's. I mean, people commented there are a zillion smartwatches already out. Why are they bringing out a smartwatch? Because they think they can pull it together in a way that other people can't. And the same goes for you and your businesses, and the same goes for us and our business. If you see somebody in the marketplace, a competitor or somebody else, I don't advise you to steal their idea, but I do strongly advise you to pay attention. And if somebody's doing something better than you or interesting to you, don't be afraid to iterate on it. Don't be afraid to be inspired by their idea, to do something in your own voice, in your own brand, in your own style that borrows from what they're doing and pushes you along. And when you're doing speeches, I'll just close with this, when you're doing speeches, if you can't do a kick-ass slide deck, and we've seen a few of them here today, if you can't do a kick-ass slide deck, don't do slides. Thanks.